Hello and welcome back to the Pretty Serious Bike Racing Podcast. I'm Dane Cash, and we are here after the Glasgow Super Worlds ended just yesterday. We got lots of Worlds racing to talk about. It's a very exciting time. We've got new world champions across the board, and we have, as ever, the bike racing analyst extraordinaire Cosmo Catalano here to share his insights. I'm excited to hear him. Cosmo, how you doing?
Pretty good, Dane. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Doing good. We've also got Kit Nicholson, who is our chief Scottish correspondent, which is a pretty cool thing to have after Glasgow Worlds. Kit, how are you?
I'm surviving post 11 days of mayhem.
I hope it was a fun mayhem.
Yeah, and it was a remarkably, well, I wouldn't say dry because it wasn't dry, but there was a pretty decent couple of weeks of weather for Scotland.
Yeah, that's good. That's good, especially after the last time the Worlds came to the UK and it was.
Yeah, we beat Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Well done, Scotland.
Yeah, that was nice.
It is August though, so.
True. Yeah. Well, maybe that's a sign for the future. Maybe that's what they should do if they ever go to do a Worlds in the UK. Joining us again, someone who I always love to hype your results, Ruth, and I don't have to really go very far this time because you are now the 2023 second place finisher at Leadville, and that's pretty exciting. Ruth Edwards, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
How was your race? What were the moments that stood out? Who were the unheralded riders at the Leadville Trail 100?
I mean, I didn't see that many people, to be honest. You ride alone a lot of the time, or with men, But I rode with this lovely guy called Jack. He helped me out for a long time. So thanks, Jack. And
Cheers,
that
Jack.
stood out
Yeah.
was probably the time that someone played Dancing Queen when I was climbing Powerline, and I just couldn't help but laugh and sing while climbing a terribly steep climb on my mountain bike.
That seems like something that people should try to emulate at future races. Get some ABBA going when you're going up a hard climb. I like that. Well, Ruth, we are very excited for you. It's pretty cool when you are looking through race results and you see the name of a person who you're going to be podcasting with coming up. That's pretty cool. I think it means that Green Mountain Stage Race Mountains Classification winner Cosmo Catalano, you got to get back out there.
Category 4B, I believe.
Okay.
We should specify. I don't want people to be looking for my good results when they are. They're good for people who aren't good at racing. If you get rid of all the good people, I am a solid racer.
All right, let's talk about all the action this weekend. It's going to be fun. We got all kinds of racing going on in the past few days. But first, let me remind you, if you're listening to this podcast, that this podcast and all the other podcasts we do, Wheel Talk and Placeholders and Geek Warning, everything we do over at escapecollective.com, all of those things are member funded. And that means that if you're enjoying them, it'd be really cool if you could become one of our members. If you could join the cool club over here at the Escape Collective. You should head on over to escapecollective.com/join and check it out if you haven't already. If you have, then thanks. We appreciate it. But if you haven't, escapecollective.com/join. You can sign up, become part of this very cool community, and you'll be supporting all the cool things that we're doing. So yeah, check it out. All right, we've got World's action to cover. I think we're going to spend most of the show talking women's road race because women's road race, just road racing in general, I think usually has more things to talk about than a time trial. But we'll start with the TTs because they were chronologically first. On the women's side, I think the biggest news, other than just the result, is that the pre-race favorite did not finish the race. Marlon Racer dropped out of the race in the middle of it. Chloe Dygert went on to take the win, which was not particularly surprising given that she was the second favorite and the first favorite was out. What do we think about what the result means for the future? I personally was really impressed with Grace Brown. 6 seconds behind Chloe Dygert I did not expect that quality of a ride. So that was really impressive from the Australian. And then Christina Schweinberger of Austria was really all over the place this weekend. She was very much in the mix on both the TT and the road race.
I think she's someone I've been enjoying watching all season long. It was a little bit easier in the earlier season because she was the Austrian road champ. So you could see her doing a lot of support work. I think she raced really well in support of, I want to say, Marta Trojan in the break at Roubaix. She did a lot of kind of chase interrupting in the closing meters. If you remember Roubaix, it was super touch and go whether or not that break would escape for a while. And yet, I mean, clearly she's coming into form. She's really, really strong, and we'll talk about her more in the road race.
We have a piece up at escapecollective.com about Reusser and her leaving of the TT. And, of course, she races for the super team that is SD Works, which, they showed their superness yet again in the road race. But, yeah, it is a reminder that even the very, very best riders, sometimes they just need to take a break. And then on the other side is the winner, Chloe Dygert, who obviously she's a talented time trialist. This is not a surprise. But her results this year, it's really been the first season where we've seen her doing a very extensive European racing campaign. She was in La Vuelta. She rode at the Vuelta a Burgos. She took a stage win at Ride London. And then she raced the Giro. And I think with this result, I would have to imagine that she sees this as a successful season. I mean, it's been a pretty impressive run of results up to this point, and I think this is the big international win that will really crown things off. And I have to say, I think we're going to see her continue to grow and develop as a road racer. But it's obvious that the kind of the base talent is there for success. I mean, she's a TT and also track racing, by the way, superstar, and she just needs to get better at racing. When there's other people around.
Yeah, I think it's super fun to see her race the road kind of all year. I think historically the US and the time trialists don't really race that much road. So particularly when it comes down to world selection and Olympic selection, just have a rider that is really, really competitive in the road races is really cool and fun to see. It was sad she wasn't able to start the road race because she was sick, I think. And I know Chloe probably would have liked to win the time trial by more than 5.5 seconds or 6 seconds to Grace Brown. She definitely gets more competitive with herself than I think anybody else. But yeah, I think super good win for her and confidence. And it seemed like she'd been really training hard for it recently, but she never really seems to have a very smooth road. I've known her for, I don't know, since 2014 or something, and it felt like every year she has an injury or an illness or something. So the fact that she has been riding really strong this year has been cool to see.
Yeah, I think that's been a big part of her kind of career so far, is just these constant battles with injury and illness. But she's still only 26. I mean, you would think that she's got some big years ahead of her, and I think that's a good sign. And with the TT result and the fact that, okay, now she's raced the Vuelta, the Giro, like she's getting that under her feet, and I think we're going to see more success from her with the innate talent that she has, the engine that she has. It's hard to imagine she wouldn't have more success going forward. So congrats to Chloe Dygert and the U.S. For taking a world title in the TT. On the men's side, we had the nation that was favored to win did indeed win the race, although one of their riders was disappointing. And he's usually not that disappointing. Okay, he finished up there, but he was a favorite to win.
Was his road race disappointing because he didn't win that too?
He
definitely
finished second in the road race, at least. It wasn't even close in the time trial.
It wasn't close in the road race. He was 2.5 minutes down.
Second is still second. And Wout van Aert was not there in the TT, but his teammate for the day, his compatriot, Remco Evenepoel, took the win and thus exchanged his road race rainbow bands for TT rainbow bands really nice ride from Remco. It was a very entertaining, I would say, as TTs go, battle, in that we had kind of the changing of hands of the hot seat. Josh Tarling, the Welshman, was the real surprise of the day, in that he spent some time in the hot seat, ended up finishing on the podium, third overall. Third in the.
I predicted this, by the way. I don't think I told anyone, so I was not surprised at all.
Why didn't you say it? Why didn't you tell us?
Because I was trying to, I don't know, stay awake probably in the middle of the week of chaos. No, he absolutely destroyed the British national championships earlier this summer.
Yeah.
And he has also absolutely dominated the domestic UK time trial scene, which, as you're probably aware, a bit like hill climbing, it's huge, and it's what Alex Dowsett made his name through. So that Josh Tarling was on the podium is absolutely no surprise to most British fans, I think.
So he's 19 years old. I think that's
and enormous.
That's the surprising part of this. Yeah, he is.
Is he
what
bigger
is
than Ghana?
1.9 meters in feet?
Well, if you look at the podium picture, you've got when they're still all on their respective steps, they're all the same height. And so when you consider that Remco is, I don't know, 8 inches above Ghana and a further 6 inches above Tarling, and they're all the same height,
Right.
that goes
There
to
you
show
go.
just about the sort of difference you've got.
It looks like he's about 6'4" in the imperial units. Yeah, he's a tall guy, but only 19 years old, and to go out and do that with the elites. So yeah, he was the junior TT champ last year, but to go straight from that to being on the podium against some pretty big names. Again, we've mentioned Evenepoel and Wout van Aert, but there's also, Philip Ogana, the two-time champ, was second, and then most of the other big TT names in the world, with the exception of the guy who destroyed everybody in the TT of the Tour de France, Jonas Vingegaard was not there. But yeah, Josh Tarling, heck of a ride, and I think Ineos Grenadiers have to be pretty happy that the 19-year-old kid, I mean, he's a kid, is already this good. But Remco, doing Belgium proud and helping to maybe take away the sting a little bit of the Belgians getting beaten by their neighbors, the Dutch, in the men's road race. And it was a close battle in the end between Ghana and Evenepoel. So I think the big story, other than Tarling stunning everybody, well, okay, I guess not Kit, but the rest of us who don't follow the UK time trial scene, and who maybe just didn't expect him to be this good this early. The other big story, I think, was Ghana kind of coming back, because coming into this TT, Ghana had not really done that much in the biggest TTs. Yes, he had done a really great job to win the overall in 2 stages of the Tour de Wallonie, but that's not the biggest race in the world. And, he didn't win any TTs at the Giro, which is like Ghana and Giro TTs. That's his thing. But he got beaten by Evenepoel there. And yeah, he did get beaten by him again here at Worlds, but all in all, I was very impressed. I think he really showed that he is very much still in it. Back in the TT game, he was just 12 seconds off of Evenepoel on a course that I think suited Evenepoel pretty well. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that little climb at the end was perfect for Evenepoel. But also, I mean, Ghana is historically a bit of a power time trialist, isn't he? He's that kind of, if it's a flat TT out and back, it's got his name all over it. So this was a bit more hilly than might have suited, Ghana circa World Championship titles. So I wonder if, he's been climbing really well this year, and last year actually, in the Giro. I think he even won a mountain stage from the breakaway, granted, last year, I think, wasn't it? So I wonder if there's a little bit that he has been targeting this, to peaking at this moment and knowing that he's got to, he's no match against Evenepoel in a hill climb, but if he's going to do his power thing and do well on the climbs, he can sacrifice other time trials to go for this one by working on his climbing more. Obviously it didn't quite work out, but it was, like you say, he and so many others this past week have peaked at the right moment, and shown what they can do on the biggest stage in their biggest targets.
Yeah, but to that point, it's been very much in the TTs that he has not quite been as his dominant old self, because in the mass start events, he's been really impressive this year, finishing second at San Remo and overall taking second overall in some GC races earlier this year is really impressive. So maybe just sort of a reorienting of of his priorities. But yeah, he still managed to finish second in the World's TT, so good on Filippo Ganna.
And he did still win a world title. He did win the IP on the track. Very close.
He did.
Exciting
He did.
race.
He rode around inside on
Very fast.
a wooden course very fast, and that is something that we should keep in mind. He and so did Chloe Dygert. So there's a bunch of
Lotte
other names
Kopecky.
who did
So did
pretty
Lotte
well.
Kopecky.
We're going to talk about one of them pretty soon, I think. Yeah, there were quite a few. We talked, I think, a lot about the expectations for riders who are trying to do multiple things at this Worlds, and I think that the big focus was mostly on Vanderpool and trying to do the double of road and mountain. But good on all the track riders for all the various titles they won on track and road, which is actually quite a lot of the big names who were involved here were competing on the track as well as the road. And yeah, Tadej Pogacar was in the TT as well. He's a rider who sometimes has done a pretty impressive TT. I'm thinking of a certain Tour de France a few years ago. I'm thinking of this year's Tour de France where he walloped Wout van Aert, but just wasn't quite as fast as Jonas Vingegaard. He was decidedly less brilliant against the clock this weekend.
Yeah, I think with Pogacar, it's most likely a case that he was still on his knees from the road race, and he'd said before the World Championships that he was already knackered and there was very little chance he was going to the Vuelta, despite everyone begging him for the desperate showdown between Evenepoel, Pogacar and Vingegaard. But I mean, he was. I don't know if it's actually been withdrawn, but because it probably ought to be. But he was fined after the road race for missing the mixed zone, post podium. So he'd got his medal, having beaten Mads Pedersen in the sprint for third, which ought to show us just how hard that race was. But he had to be escorted away by his team staff because he was about to collapse and he was so utterly exhausted from the road race that he needed medical attention. And he looked dazed in every interview or every photograph, even in those podium shots following the road race. So I think he was only half there at the time trial. And it's quite, I mean, in a way it's, and we've said it at this Tour de France this year, even more so than we did last year. He has shown that he's not this automaton who just rinses everybody on whatever terrain he tries his hand, whether it's Flanders or some big mountain in the Alps. But he is fallible and he gets tired, and he's clearly very, very, very tired. And if he was to turn up at the Vuelta, he would not be the Pogacar that we want him to be. So it's quite nice. No, that's a horrible thing to say. It's quite kind of humanizing and I don't want to use the word relatable, but I just have, so I will. Sometimes you need a break, and I think this kid does. After handing bottles up to his girlfriend, I think they should go on holiday, frankly.
Kit, would you say that he looked cream crackered to you?
Yes, I think that would be an accurate summation of how he felt.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. Yeah, Tadej Pogacar, thanks for entertaining us for the past several months. Now go take a break. You've earned it. A couple other storylines. One, I think, I wonder whether Tobias Foss will do anything to come close to his world title in the near future. He was not a favorite going in despite being the defending champion, and he finished 11th. And I'm kind of curious to see where he goes from here in his career. He had a brilliant ride, obviously, at last year's TT, and since then, not too much. So, still only 26. He's got time, but I do wonder what's going on with Tobias Foss and whether he's kind of be able to get back to that at some point in his career.
He did beat Stefan Kung and Stefan Bissiger and quite a lot of other big names.
The Swiss Stefans.
The Swiss Stefans.
Yeah.
So Stefan Kung, probably another one that we'd thought he might have done better.
Kung
No, it wasn't a course that suited him.
I think maybe was
But,
also cream crackered from the road race.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It was a. I was actually, I don't know. I think 11th is obviously not what you'd hope from the reigning world champion.
Yeah. And speaking of
it was
former winners, thoughts to Rowan Dennis. Sympathy for Rowan Dennis, who finished in the top 10, but had a real bummer of a last, 1 minute of his Worlds racing career when he crashed in the finale, and it just I don't know, probably not the best way to end your storied Worlds TT career that includes 2 previous wins. Again, still finishing 7th. It's a heck of a ride from Rohan Dennis.
He's had a strange career, right? It hasn't been super typical.
Yeah,
for
that's
a
true.
variety
It's been an
of reasons.
atypical career.
And it's sort of, I mean, I won't want to say it's appropriate. I don't wish anybody misfortune in the last bit of their road race, but I think he still showed he has tremendous talent even as he winds down his career, and maybe has encountered a typical misfortune alongside that talent. So,
Yeah.
And he probably wasn't going to win, was he? I mean, even
No,
though
yeah,
clearly, you didn't just leave 2 minutes in that
Sure.
last minute, but yeah.
All right, that's the TTs. Remco Evenepoel, your men's champ. Chloe Dygert, your women's champ. Let's talk road race, where the favorite won. Cosmo.
yep, that's it.
Wait.
That was it. A lot of
Well,
Quebec.
yeah, give me the rundown here. 30 seconds.
Did
Set the
things
scene.
happen between the start and the finish?
I guess you tell me.
Similar. We've seen the road course with the men's race. There were fewer laps on the circuit. We saw a lot of people trying to do stuff very early, even before Crow Hill. We can talk about that later. For me, the big move of the day came around 74K to go, where Elise Chabe of Switzerland went clear solo and stayed there for about 30 kilometers until all the Dutch women decided to chase at the same time, the remaining Dutch women, I should say. And at about 27K to go, I think we saw Annemiek van Vleuten lead an attack that pulled away a group of 7, 2 Swiss riders, 2 Dutch riders, Schweinberger, Kopecky, and Lizzie Deignan, of all people. And it was a tactically kind of touchy group. I think we had a lot of the Dutch and the Swiss kind of looking at each other, especially because they know each other. And Annemiek van Vleuten and Demi Vollering didn't seem to be entirely on the same page. I wouldn't quite say they were arguing with each other, but there seemed to be some reluctance or confusion around whose turn it was to pull and who was going to follow what move. Eventually, Cicely Uttrup-Ludwig tried her luck around 7K to go, and Kopecky went with her. Opened up a gap, and then over the top of the climb they attacked on, Kopecky really popped the top, immediate separation. And no one was going to catch her. She was, I think we'll talk about this more, but she looked super confident all day and rode it in solo for the win, with Vollering just managing to kind of step ladder her way up to Uttrup-Ludwig and take second right on the line.
Yeah, the team dynamics always make Worlds interesting. That's true every year at every race, particularly when in this race, that final group, many of those riders are trade teammates. It was very much an SD Works dominated finale, but none of them are teammates here at this race. And that made things very interesting. Maybe more interesting than they would have otherwise been. I think definitely more interesting than they would have otherwise been. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it really played to Kopecky's favor because you had, I wouldn't say neutralizing effect between Vollering and Reusser, because they both know how strong they are. Like, they train together a lot. And I think Kopecky really knew that if she got the right moment with the right rider, which she did with Uttrup-Ludwig trying that full power break, that she could kind of leverage that against them. I think we also saw Vollering cramping up a little bit too. She was not, she unclipped and stretched her leg out after following an attack earlier in the race before the big breakup. But I don't necessarily feel like we saw the famous situation of trade teams interfering with a nationally contested race is the 2000 Olympics, where you had 2 Team Telecom guys ride away together in a team time trial. And we didn't see something like that, but I agree it added kind of a depth to the tactical situation. Not that Kopecky needed the help to win, but I think it played to her favor.
Yeah, let's go back in time a little bit, where the race definitely was active from a pretty long ways out. Attacks from big names. And this is true on the men's side as well. We saw some. Maybe this is something that people learned over the course of the week watching the other races. I mean, when you watch the juniors do it first, and then you got the elite men, it was definitely a race where big names were active early.
Yeah, you saw Deignan and Chabe, who both were super active later in the race, active in a breakaway at 130K to go. Like, I think some of this was to sort of take the sting out of the big climb on the course, the Crow Hill Road. I'm thinking particularly of Blanca Vash, who ended up winning the U23 title. She got to that climb and immediately soft pedaled. It really seemed like, okay, well, I'm here. I'm going to climb this as easily as I possibly can, save my matches for the rest of the race. But I think it was a course that really, despite all the pre-race complaining, like fostered aggression, fostered moves, got people to try stuff, and I'm 100% behind that.
Especially if they watched the under-23 men the day before, when it was pretty much carnage, and that was the only day when, I mean, I thought the circuit was great, if maybe edging towards a few too many corners, especially when it was, you're coming down a really steep descent and then straight into a 90-degree turn. And when it's wet, that was chaos, and that was the case on Saturday. So I did wonder if maybe the women would have looked at that and thought, we've got to make it hard before we arrive at the pinch points and corners and steep ramps. And so I think there was an attempt at that, although there was still a pretty large bunch at the beginning of the laps. And yet, before they'd even finished the first full lap, even Kopecky was starting to make some punchy accelerations to try and whittle things down. So I definitely think that, that circuit and the routes leading into the circuit, it gave us a real open book, while at the same time letting us, there were a few key scenarios that could play out, and I think we saw one of each of them, with early moves being successful and the weather playing a hand as well.
Yeah, Kopecky, I mean, to that note about her making accelerations, she was the pre-race favorite. The previews really liked her chances. The odds makers liked her chances. Kaylee said on our editor-in-chief, called her the favorite, and he's really growing into this role of actually predicting race winners correctly recently. So good on him for that. She rode like that was the case this weekend. She rode like she was the favorite. She clearly had this sense that all eyes were on her, and it was going to be all about her trying to kind of make this win for herself in a way that's a little bit different from when she's racing with SD Worx, and she usually has someone else that might also be a big favorite. Here she was Belgium's big option, and she delivered.
Yeah, I think at first I was like, oh, I hope she's not doing too much. Like, it just seemed like she was kind of following so many things, and while other people were hesitating or not wanting to burn their matches, like we've just said, it was such a hard course, so I'm sure there was some hesitation in like wanting to follow everything, but I think I thought that for like maybe less than a minute before I was just like, no, she is not going to lose this bike race. There's no way this woman loses this bike race today. She's just racing. Like, she's not going to let anyone get away from her. And it just seemed to me like, I don't know, she wasn't getting tired. And when she did finally attack over the top, she just had this massive gap immediately, like it on everybody. And so it was, I don't know, it was pretty awesome.
It's quite often I don't know, you come into a race and if there's a big favourite and they go on to win it, it can be quite disappointing. But this was the opposite of that. Yeah, we had the outcome that everyone was expecting, but there was no shortage of thrill, and the way that it played out, even if it was the face that was inevitable. But I think part of that also is just the fact that this race began way before yesterday for her, and because we've been told that she's been doing all these kermesses with junior men, junior boys back home in Belgium to really get into that aggression, the attrition rate, the carnage, the being in the right position at the right time, and also the sort of flow of that sort of race where it's all stop-start and everyone's for themselves. So I think that sort of the narrative that she has written out for us over the course of the past few months, and with her dominance on all terrains. We might not have been surprised if she'd gone out the back pretty quickly, because she ought to be pretty damn tired by this point. But at the same time, she showed that she was there. She knew what she wanted to do, what she needed to do, and she was going to bloody well do it, and no one was going to get in her way.
Yeah, she was really impressive in her post-race interview. I mean, I was crying for sure watching that, just thinking about, she's had an amazing season, but like she said, she's also had a really rough year with the loss of her brother, and a really hard time for her. And so I'm sure she just probably had a lot of passion inside her to win. And it was I think she was just a really cool champion and really awesome to watch and hear.
A lot of relief as well
Yeah,
there.
I think so.
That's what I was going to say with Super Worlds, like with her track stuff, you know, heading into this, like this has been a super stressful, focused week, and to just kind of be road race and done, like everything finished, you know, champagne and pizza. I forget who said that. I think it was Cicely Uttrup-Ludwig.
That was
like,
Uttrup-Ludwig, yeah.
And I mean, you could just see the relief, you know, kind of between the tears in Kopecki's post race interviews. I did not cry, but I definitely felt the emotions. So
to your point, Kit, about this was the favorite winning, but it was still very exciting. I think there's a lot of things going into that. There's a big part of that is that Belgium has not had a women's road champ in a very long time, and Kopecky has really been just spearheading this sort of this evolution in women's cycling in Belgium, which, as she said in her post-race interview, the men's side, we all know it's sort of like it's a real heartland for cycling, and she kind of pointed out that the men's side obviously has lots of success, but for the women, this is a very, very, very long time coming, and I think that was a cool storyline to watch, particularly when so many of the other favorites for the race are Dutch, and it was sort of like, yes, Kopecky was the number one favorite, but as in any women's road race, the Dutch are always lurking, and it's not easy to beat them, especially right now when Demi Vollering is riding as well as she is. So Kopecky riding the way that she did, I think if she had been, like if Kopecky had been a young rider who was feeling pretty good but not awesome, the ways that she rode might have been the subject of criticism. Oh, why is she chasing down this attack, or why is she doing all this stuff? But she was just so strong that it shows. It's sort of the other side of that. It's like, oh, here's what can happen if you're this good. You can just chase everybody down, and then despite being almost certainly the best sprinter in that group, you can just leave them behind if you feel like it. I figured she would wait for the sprint because she almost certainly would have won the sprint, but she just decided, nah, I'm gonna go off on my own and drop everybody in the end, and it worked, and it was awesome.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from that race was there's only one Kopecky, and that would also have been the takeaway if she'd lost, because of the domination in the other teams. But yeah, I think she was just an absolutely worthy winner.
Yeah, and on the year that makes her the Flanders and World Championship winner, which is, yeah, and in addition to her track results, her incredible Tour de France, where she won the points title and finished second. That was a real stunning ride for her to finish second overall. It's just been a really great year for Lotte Kopecky. Any, in general, moments that kind of stood out from the race that we haven't covered or that might have flown under the radar a little bit?
I think Vollering's battle back to second was really good. I think it was some of the grittiest racing I've seen her do. Not necessarily the best. She maybe seemed a little tired, was obviously cramping, didn't have the best team support. I shouldn't say it was bad. It was just awkward. That's really the best way to put it. But she managed to kind of, I mean, after she was cramping, after Kopecky got away, she kind of got into a move with Reusser. They worked fairly well. She seemed to rest and recover a little bit, even though she was rolling through, and then broke clear from that and really chased Uttrup-Ludwig down, like in the final 500 meters of the race, and won the sprint. And it was just very, like, it was not your typical Estee Works style win, right? It was just everyone's cream crackered. She's just doing everything she possibly can, fighting, biting, tearing, whatever, to get through, and managed to take second behind someone who wasn't going to lose. And I thought it's not the racing we see Vollering have to do very often, and it's cool to see that she can do it if she has to.
Right before she cramped, she attacked on the steep climb, and she started attacking. Like, they were just bridging back up to, can't remember exactly who it was, but I think it was Kopecky, and there was like maybe 2 or 3 of them, but she had just been gapped and they were coming up fast on the climb, but she attacked while she was still way behind them, which I found to be a bit confusing because she used so much energy, and then she was only just next to them, and then everybody, or Royso, I should have looked it up exactly who it was that she was with before I jumped on here, but I didn't. But whoever it was, just like at the top of the climb, all just got onto her wheel. So she did this massive effort, essentially behind, next to, and just in front of everybody, and then came around the right-hand corner at the front, and that's when she was kind of stretching just after. So I was like, I don't know if she had in her brain, like, this is the moment I'm going to go, this is my point, I'm going to do it anyway, but it just seemed like like kind of a really big waste of energy at that point. Like it didn't get her any further than where she was. So that was the only thing I really saw from her that I was like, oh, that seemed kind of confusing. But she did always like battle to try and get, that second position is for sure impressive. But it seemed like she just wasn't being like as thoughtful with her energy there.
And she seemed like she was probably the most marked in that group, and she had to do a lot. Well, I don't know if she had to do most work, especially she had a albeit awkward teammate as well, until she punctured out. But yeah, I think although Kopecky obviously gesticulated wildly several times and looked a bit frustrated at times, I think for Vollering it must have been a pretty frustrating race, because she would have been, she had the favourite status, but also with a team that they really ought to have delivered something, and they did. They got a silver medal. That's great. But she looked so many times like she just had the burden of the whole race on her shoulders, having to drag groups back together, attacking in odd places, and so it looked like a hard final few laps for her.
I was impressed by the presence of mind of everybody else around Demi Vollering whenever there was a gap, because they very much, told themselves, we are not going to work. We're going to make Demi Vollering do it, and she did. And I thought that was impressive, and I'm sure that was really, really, really annoying for her. But for everybody else, it was smart racing, and they did a good job of not making themselves work more than they had to. And she was constantly having to close down gaps, and I think everyone knew she was going to, and she did. So it worked out pretty well for everybody else. And again, frustrating for her, but that's bike racing. Speaking of other riders, Kit Nicholson gave me the idea for that segue, by the way, listeners, you should know. Let's talk about some of the unheralded folks in this race. Ruth, I know you had one, so I'll let you start.
I thought it was really awesome to see Lizzie Deignan really racing her bike. I think she's raced for Trek a fair bit this year as a pretty key member of the team, lead outs. We've seen her on the front of the race before. It's actually the pointy part, but she's been doing a ton of teamwork for Trek this year. And yesterday we got to see her, race for herself and really put in some good attacks. And she looked like she was like really suffering and doing everything she could to be there. And I just thought that was really fun, as someone we've seen race for a long time, but maybe not have any results in a while. Good to see her do such a strong race.
And on a course that she knows as well. She's won in Glasgow twice at least. So yeah, she was on happy hunting ground.
I think it's a course that just sort of suits her talents when she's at her best. And yeah, to finish sixth here was a really strong ride for her, and I think, really cool to watch. I really enjoyed watching her finishing well in the race. Anybody else?
I'm probably going to butcher the name, but Justine Hekere, I think is how you say it, was a Belgian teammate of Kopecky's who really controlled the main peloton behind Chabet's break. I wouldn't say she chased her down. I think Chabet had a minute for most of the time she was up the road, but we saw throughout the week that this was a tough course to really control and set tempo on, and she just kind of parked at the front and held the race until the Dutch came forward to try and pull that back. And I don't think that's easy on this course. I think that's a lot of work, and it was pretty instrumental to Kopecky's win. So
yeah, she's kind of coming to her own this year. Had a really nice start to the season. Very last day of the Setmana Ciclista in Valencia, she snuck into a move that basically propelled her right to the overall win there. And another strong ride at Worlds. Also, we should say that Cecilie Uttrup-Ludwig was, I think, really impressive on the day. I think she made the race. Like she was the one whose decisions and tactics and move. I think everything else kind of developed around that in the end, and she still finished third. I was pretty heartbroken that she got beaten at the line for the silver medal. It was close, and she had worked so hard. But Demi Vollering is good, and she'll beat you sometimes. But anyway, chapeau to Uttrup-Ludwig for finishing on the podium there. And really, really entertaining finale all around. A minute, 2 minutes, something like that after the race ended, we got to see Annemiek van Vleuten roll across the line and kind of bidding farewell to the fans. I thought that was pretty nice. She seemed to really be enjoying the moment, and that was great. I'm sure she would have wanted things to have played out a little bit differently in the race, but still good to see her kind of enjoying that farewell. All right, so that's Worlds. Congrats to all the winners. Congrats to the likes of Tom Pidcock and Pauline Ferrand-Prévot and the mountain bike races, all the track champions, all of the, artistic cycling champions who we've not named, but good on you for doing what you do. Yeah.
Cycle ball?
Yeah, that too. Yep. All right. That's it for us. We've been pretty serious for long enough today. I think we can now go be unserious for the rest of the week. Cosmo, Kit, Ruth, great having you on the show. Thanks for joining, and we will see you all when we see you. Have a good one.